One. Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today, I'm interviewing the YouTuber and podcaster Bootsy Greenwood. His podcast could be described as spiritual or new age, but at its foundation, it's based on curiosity, open-mindedness, and good humor in the exploration of the nature of reality, whatever that is. So it's nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the time.
Right. So to start off, how did you get into spirituality and podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've answered this the same way a bunch of times now, but I would have to say the answer to that question is crippling depression.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I feel like that's a lot of people get into spirituality that way, you know, like some of my friends who I speak to, they have these like terribly tragic sounding stories, and they are tragic, but that's usually often, you know, a catalyst for them to change their life, you know? And so I would say that was the big introduction, right? Like I was not enjoying my life. So I started to dig deeper and search for meaning within myself. And what does that even mean? Right? Like everyone said, just look inside yourself.
Was depression the best thing that ever happened to you?
I can't say that it was or wasn't,
right.
You know, but I think it definitely helped. I mean, I started questioning my beliefs about the world pretty intensely. I'd say about 8 years ago, you know, and I've always been a thinker, but ultimately I just kind of wanted to have fun at life until I really started to learn more and more about reality and the nature of it and other things. Some of it was pretty intense, you know, and not really enjoyable to learn about. But that doesn't mean that, you know, you have to be victimized by the reality that is, you know.
So were you an atheist before you had your awakening, or whatever you call it?
I wouldn't say so. I tried out several different philosophies. I don't think I've ever really been an atheist, especially not ardently. I mean, I have always really kind of subscribed to the idea that, you know, everything resolves to one. We're all part of one consciousness, and you know, the Bill Hicks quote would sum it up really, really well. It's just a ride, you know, we're all here experiencing one consciousness, experiencing each other. And that's kind of how I looked at it. You know, in college, I would have called myself an animist, you know, just to be flowery. But you know, the idea that everything's alive or part of God, you know. You know, but I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to know. You know, we were just, even before off air, like, how do you know that you know, right? Like, and it's just a fractal, and it just goes on and on. So that's always super fun. But I was actually in the Christian church when I was growing up and witnessed some things in the Christian church that really couldn't make me be an atheist.
What sort of things?
You know, I guess you would say miracles, demons being cast out of people, stuff like that, you know, just the good old fashioned Southern Pentecost.
Okay. I've got a question actually about Christianity.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's all this guilt and shame and fear in Christianity often. I'm generalizing, but
I barely noticed, bro.
And these are low frequencies, right? Absolutely. How do they get rid of demons with low frequencies?
Well, I would think that it's ultimately calling out on Jesus, which is, you know, a love figure, you know, and I think that has a lot of power to do with it. You know, I think that figure, for whatever reason, does have a lot of power, and I think that's kind of curious. I've even, you know, I certainly wouldn't call myself, I don't call myself anything. You know, one of my favorite philosophers of all time is Robert Anton Wilson, who said, I don't believe anything, I have my suspicions, right? And so I think if we can all kind of come from that place, then we can have a conversation about anything. You know, nobody has to get upset or triggered or any of that kind of stuff if we just kind of come from that approach. And so that's kind of where I want to come from, as not like, you know, jumping into any camp because of the unseen power of any group think itself, right? But I have no issue with any particular religion or belief system. I think they're all trying to get at the same thing.
Okay. When you were depressed, did you ever, I imagine you've got an open-minded perspective now. Have you always had that, or did you come to that through spirituality?
I think I've always been naturally kind of a curious person. I would say that. But it didn't become an obsession until it became an obsession, right? Like, and then at that point, it was an obsession, and I had to.
When you saw other people, pardon me, when you saw other people not being curious,
Uh-huh.
how did you feel about that?
I've had mixed emotions about it, right? Like at some points I felt superior because like I know things you don't know, and I can, I could manipulate you, right? Because I have this knowledge. At other times I've felt very alone, very, very lonely. And then I don't know, I guess it's varied a lot. But I think in the beginning I definitely felt that like arrogance, like, oh, I know, I know stuff. I have the tools that you don't have. So blah, blah, blah. And honestly, like, I can't say that I've ever like even attempted to do something like that, other than like, just like doing work, right? Like, and trying to convince somebody for a job to do a certain thing or something, but never anything. I don't know. It never mattered. Even if you do know stuff that other people don't know, it still doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We take it too serious. We take things too seriously.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, you might know this thing, but there's still more that you could learn. So you might still get owned. You might get worked over by somebody who's completely oblivious and subconsciously. You know what I mean? Like, you think you know, so you don't know shit. Pardon my.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
But
this is a podcast. On my podcast, I just swear when I feel like swearing.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm not a big swearer, but I mean, I do swear from time to time. It's not like part of my personality or anything, but I'll drop some F-bombs, watch out. Just no, I think that our own confidence in what we know, the fact that we think we know what we know so much and so well, is part of the problem that we're really facing. Like, if people could just detach just a little bit, just step back a little bit from this reality that they really perceive to be, because we are creating reality. And so the more like we just like are absolutely certain about it, the firmer it kind of gets for everyone. You know what I'm saying?
You do. There's something interesting I've noticed on your podcast where you have a certain position or perspective, like that we create a reality, for example, but you might actually make the case kind of for the opposite at the same time. But it's like, I get the sense that it's a non-dualistic thing that you're doing. So do we create our own reality? Do we not create our own reality? And how is it both?
Yeah. That's a great question. Yes, and it is both, right? Like, there is an objective reality, but we're each having a subjective experience of it. Reality is also moving. It's not the static thing, right? Like, we see birds and trees are growing leaves and it's moving. It's a real life living thing, So I think people kind of forget about that part. So in the whole like non-dualistic part, when I say there's an objective reality, I there is like this physical world out here that we can agree upon, that I'm talking through this microphone, I'm seeing you, on the screen, all that kind of stuff.
Is it real though, or is it just an illusion?
Well, everything is real. So like, I don't know how else to answer that question other than to say that yes, it's real.
Yes, actually, that's a very interesting answer, because that includes the fictional, doesn't it?
Correct. Yes. Everything, the universe is mind. So all is mind. So everything you can think of, and then some, all the way to infinity, because infinity is real, right? We know that. So if infinity is real, then everything exists already. It's just a matter of us playing with that. And the sort of idea of manifestation, I guess, is that we are little manifesting machines, and what we believe about reality, we bring into it. And so each and every one of us, if we're just like taking a cue off of, let's say, the mainstream media, then we're all going to believe a narrative and then create that into the world, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And really, I think that's the difference between spirituality and non-spirituality, is responsibility. But yeah, so everything would be real, right? So in the mind of God, or which is synonymous to the dream world, by the way, infinity exists, and you can explore and do all of these things, and all those things are real in that sense that they are part of infinity. That makes it real. Now, whether it's experienced in this physical, dimension that we inhabit, the third dimension, that's that I don't think that means whether it's real or not. Like you can't go do that goes down to the subjective experience of the observer, right? And so you can't say that someone who is in an insane asylum, let's say, and they think they're the leader of Nepal or something, right? I don't know, that they're not experiencing that reality, that's not real to them. So there's a subjective and an objective experience, and the subjective experience is really up to us to choose, and reality will reflect back to us what we know it is, right? And so it's like a mirror. So
Right. But we're not always aware that we're choosing or what we're choosing.
Yeah, most people are not aware at all that they're choosing. That's the big thing. I think the idea of choice is so powerful, and people don't realize how to use free will, right?
Right. So that's the next question. And I have a sense that it might have something to do with transurfing, which is something we talk about. So how do we use free will effectively?
By choosing. And so that's I think that's where Vadim really nails it, is he simplifies the thing, and the law of attraction, or like believing things doesn't work. It just puts more resistance often. It makes you feel unworthy. You know what I mean? Like desire versus doubt, there's a real difference there that's always made up by the other. The more you desire something, the more you like doubt that it's possible.
People with the law.
No, go ahead.
So with the law of attraction, people often talk about, one of the criticisms of it is the idea that people are just like, they want something and they don't have it because they want it. And so they get the opposite of what they want, or they reinforce not having it. And also it can be like a self-serving thing. Whereas like, what if it's actually the law of frequency that's more important? And obviously you'll attract more what you really want naturally. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot that it comes down to, because it really is ultimately about resistance. And what is it that you want, and why do you want it? That's a good question that people don't often ask. They're like, I want this, I want that. Why do you want it? What is it that you really want? Like, perhaps you don't really want that thing. You think you want it. And so now that makes you want it because it seems appealing by societal norms, or because your friend said so, or whatever, right? Like,
or maybe trauma.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it could be trauma as well. So are you really using intention to get to that thing? Probably not. You just desire it. You think it's cool and it's something that you want to have. So you're actually actively resistant toward it, telling yourself that you don't deserve it because you want it so much. There's kind of like two different things as far as it goes, right? Like wanting and having. So, I mean, if you are the thing already, then you can simply choose it. So you don't have, because you are, right? Like infinity, you're real, you're connected to everything.
So awareness comes first.
I would say so.
Because if you don't know you're on a board surfing, then how can you surf?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think awareness really comes first as far as addressing problems or solutions, right? Like we need to know, you have to have a map and know where you are to get to where you're going, so.
Right, you're going to have a map. You've got to know you're doing it. You've got to have balance, because otherwise you'll just fall off.
That's true.
Yeah, that I love that metaphor. Transurfing is a very good word for it. Why is it called transurfing?
I have no idea. It's not, it's a book that this guy Vadim Zeland wrote. And
is it similar to Taoism?
Very much so. Yeah. Very much so. There's a lot in common with Taoism, Buddhism, what is it? Like, I guess Hermetic magic principles are in there a little bit, even, but quantum physics and that sort of view on things. He kind of has like a scientific view that's kind of cool. And he talks a lot about resonance as well. And so, when we get into that resistance and the why, asking the why, there's a concept in there called pendulums. The idea that energetic informational structures are clusters of energy, basically, that we are radiating into, a world that we can't see, the dream world, what have you. And so that's what all these sort of shiny objects are. The matrix would be, I guess, made of pendulums, right?
Is it okay? I've got this image in my mind of like, when you drop a stone into a pebble and it comes out like that, but 3D, or maybe more than 3D, like infinite dimensions or something. That's all coming out like that, and like the atom is kind of like almost like that, and there's all waves coming out of fields. But like, there's a pendulum of frequency of up and down.
Yeah, that's right.
And I guess it's like when you see it at sea, right? You get like the up bit, it all congregates together. Then there's the void in between or something.
Yeah. There is like an action and then a reaction. That's why I like that alliteration so much and that illustration of the pendulum, right? Like, because this concept exists in many other terms: egregore, tulpa, tolku. It's in Buddhism. It's all over the place.
So why a pendulum, though? I don't quite get.
I don't know. I can't answer that. That's what the author used to illustrate the concept, and to me, it makes a lot of sense. It really shows difference. I can't answer why. Apparently that's like a channeled book. And it's older. I think it's been around for quite a while, actually. But it lines up with a lot of the other ideas. I just like that illustration of something going back and forth, or up and down.
Very Taoist.
Yeah,
it's the whole thing. It's like,
yeah, duality is a big part of reality too. So back to your question, like, is this world real? It's like, yeah. And the reason why is because there's conflict, like electricity is made, and that these two worlds are like having friction, right? And so that's why we get to experience this physical world, this reality. So, which is pretty cool,
Yeah. So duality, of course, is polarity. It's all like, but there's duality as part of that. And why is it important that we have the dark or the selfish or that aspect of reality there?
I don't know why, but I know that it has to be tested. So, in the Christian church, there's a saying that the mercy of God is unending. And if that's the case, then it has to be tested, doesn't it? Or does it? So again, it's about resistance and duality. So one will go as far as the other will go.
It's free will, right? And
exactly. It's free will, right? It exactly is. It's about a lot of choices being made, incalculable amounts of choices.
So how does this pendulum, this transurfing pendulum Taoist dynamic fit in with quantum physics?
That's a good question. I think it has a lot to do with, again, choosing with the observer effect. And so I believe that choosing, basically the idea is that if we choose to agree upon something, then it basically is so, right? Like we're creating something. So the idea that we could create a pendulum, for instance, or a tolku or an egregore or a demon, who knows what other, traditions have different names for these types of things. But what he's saying is it's as simple as choosing. You don't have to cast a spell and do all this other stuff or light a bunch of expensive candles, or make a mess in your bathroom. You can just choose these things. They already exist. It's the more momentum and attention and energy that they get, the bigger they get and the more they exist or are living in a sense, right?
Okay, this is something I've been curious about for a while because I was trying to make sense of the idea of demons. I've only recently discovered egregores, and I don't know much about them, to be honest. And then even the angels, I'm not sure
Sure.
you're suggesting that they're a thought form that we create in some sense or manifest. Well, everything created is from the Akashic records, so I don't know. But then there's also fifth density negative beings or fourth density negative beings that are like, I don't know, that you could compare to demons in some sense. So
Sure.
what exactly, or even the positive ones like angels or whatever, like what are they?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I think there's a lot of different names for those types of things. They're all anything is possible, truly. So I think what a lot of those existences are people's attention over time, right? And so the more I think those things get attention, I think the more real they become. That's kind of how it works, right? So we do create reality, right? Because I can say to you Mickey Mouse and you can see a very clear picture of Mickey Mouse in your head. Is Mickey Mouse real? Hell no, but he is in our minds, right?
Are they I mean, do they have souls inhabiting them, or are they more phantasms of the mind?
That's a very difficult question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
You don't need to know, but what ideas do you have?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're all expressions of infinite consciousness, and the more that we experience, the more, sort of real that all gets. But I mean, there's all manner of sort of thing out there. I mean, if you talk to someone who does astral projection, which I'm personally not an astral projectionist. I don't know what that's called, but I get to. I'm going to talk to somebody about coming up pretty soon. I'm actually really excited about that. About it. So I don't know. Like that would definitely be a really good question for someone who does astral work or has had out of body experiences and stuff.
Have you tried DMT?
Yep.
So that's another kind of out of body experience, right?
I don't know. I don't think I didn't feel like I was out of my body. I just felt like everything here
Was
sort of went away. But I mean, I think you're supposed to have your eyes closed. I think I did it wrong a couple times and I did it right one time and or at least one time. But yeah, I don't know. That's a curious. I mean, I didn't see machine elves, but that's a curious substance as well. Like very, very, very curious and interesting and quite an amazing experience. But I mean, I don't think that. I think experiences like that for me have just confirmed, what I've already known or what I believe that I know. That we are just all one, and really it's all about love. And so as far as like climbing up into those newer densities, I think that we're progressing toward that as a species. We're learning these lessons as above, so below. So as
right. Yeah.
So the same in society. And so we're learning these lessons, and it's a crazy time right now to be learning all this stuff.
Or at least we're more aware of how crazy it is right now.
Yeah, and I think that gives you perspective. So to the analogy of the pendulum, right? If you're on one, then you're down here. And so if it's swinging, then you're swinging wildly with it, correct?
Yeah.
But if the more you elevate yourself to the position of choosing, the higher you're basically getting as far as perspective above the pendulum. And so, like for right now, gas is kind of crazy right now. We have this pipeline thing going on, right? So now gas is $3 a gallon. People are freaking out. They're filling up their cars. This pendulum will eventually stop swinging, but some people are freaking out about it, and they're the ones that are down here. And then other people are like, yep, this will end. You know what I'm saying? They're right there. So it really has a lot to do with perspective. And I think that's where the power of choice is, because you can't emotionally make a decision that's out of resonance with you. You just can't. Like you can't be completely inept and have no acting ability and then go on to a film set and crush it with Bill Murray. It just doesn't work that way. You have to feel comfortable in your environment, and not everyone is comfortable in every environment,
And maybe though, you're meant to be playing that kind of character. I mean, like if you think about it, you are playing a character.
Yep.
And no matter what character there is, you're playing it well, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I just mean, like, if you were like wanting to get yourself to another sort of reality, you would have
You're at
to
the
feel
frequency you're at. That's what you mean.
you would have to feel comfortable emotionally and able to get there, you know. And I think
Right.
a lot of there's a lot of just incongruence there as far as how people, it's back to the feeling, the having really, versus the wanting. And that wanting is, again, I think often misguided, because if it was something that really aligns with you and your purpose, I think that at that point you are using intention. You're not distracted by pendulums. You're using intention to get you exactly where you are, because you won't feel out of resonance with it, because it's really meant for you. And so you're allowed to have it. There's no, you know, resistance or importance attached to it. It's instead, if it's really part of who you are and what you're meant to do, then it's really, really easy to just do that thing.
Okay, so when it comes to duality, are you aware of the law of one?
Yes.
Right, and there's service to others and service to self.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to service to self, are they just simply out of sync? Or is there like, that's their path and that is a legitimate, however, it might be unsavory to us, but yeah.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think you just nailed it. You know, I mean, it's unsavory.
So that means they need to, pardon me, but they need to harmonize with the frequencies that their purpose aligns with, right? As well.
I'll be honest with you, and I don't know that they're going off of their purpose necessarily. It could be that. It's not really for me to judge.
Yeah.
I feel like either they are or they're not, and that's maybe why they are. Ultimately, everything resolves though into love. And again, it's, you know, if it's unending, won't it be tested, right? It's again back to that. And so, are these people acting out of free will to test it, or is it, you know, sort of source playing its own game with itself, right? Ultimately,
yes to both.
Yeah, again, it's both. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just bizarre. But yeah, that's kind of how I view this progression, right? Like, we really are being, I think, tested as individuals, as beings, and there's only one way to grow, and that is through challenge. And it's uncomfortable, and it's usually challenging, and it's got to be some sort of conflict has to arise. Like, that's what life is really about.
That's what stories are about, and games and everything, really.
Yeah, and I like the idea of conflict. Like, I don't know, maybe it is the wrong idea, but story-wise, as a writer, I like the idea of conflict over like suffering, right? Like Buddha might have said, you know, life is suffering. I would say life is conflict. You know, it
friction,
is like
maybe
friction between. Yeah, that's even better. I think that's an even more apt example. Life is friction. Just be careful who you open up with and say that to, because they might get the wrong idea. You know what I mean?
Do you want to create some friction?
Excuse me. Did you know life is friction? Anyway, mine's in the gutter. There you go. Terrible. But yeah, I think that there has to be the conflict, right? Like, it's the way of the universe knowing itself. And I can't quantify it, but I know that, you know, I'm on a particular polarization. You kind of have to choose some polarization. You can't be completely dead neutral.
Well, people who are unaware are kind of all over the place until they actually pick, right?
Yep. Yeah, they're kind of like subconsciously just being, just like what are the thing that you just jab a cattle prod? They're prodded basically with, and
they're cattle.
Yeah, like a cattle. Like, well, I don't mean that they are, but like that's kind of what's happening.
They're in a pinball machine. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, a pinball machine. This reaction, this energy. You know, that's what
right.
feed off of. So it's like prod, reaction, and it's getting all this energy.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then it grows. That's how it builds more and more momentum. You know, you could even have a bunch of people freaking out about something that's not even an issue, or didn't even actually happen. Right.
So it sounds like you're talking about politics.
Well, I'm just saying that it can bleed over into politics. You know, I think a football game analogy is a really good analogy that we can use. That's not as polarizing or triggering as a political analogy, but I'm going to step on everyone's toes when it comes to politics. All it is pendulums. That's all it is. You know, so it doesn't matter what side you're on or who you voted for or whatever. It's all part of the system that is pretty much out of control.
Can you have non-dualistic politics that transcends the divides and ego?
I think you could, and it would be more individually based and based on the people who choose to be part of certain groups, right? And so there's a lot of different philosophies out there, and I think that those things are possible. I don't know that they'll be able to be necessarily implemented. And again, that comes back to like, are we going to have this? Like, am I going to talk to an anarcho-communist and a mutualist, and we're going to all argue and then come to a resolution? Well, if we do, then what?
Well, not if we argue, but I at least I'm interested in. I don't think we can just simply shy away from politics just because we're getting into spirituality and we're raising our frequency. I feel like, so I think we need to take responsibility. I mean, obviously, but we can't be like, oh, we need to save them all, and they're all just like. We can't be acting like we're superior saviors of the clueless sheep. You know, that's also like in conspiracy theories as well, that mindset can seep in, right? Sure. But like, I'm very much interested in like how we can unravel the mess and bridge divides and come together with people that either did or even do have very different perspectives and find common ground. And interestingly, you have mentioned politics a bit in your podcast. And so I kind of would like to explore that now a bit.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll be mature about it. Actually, I'm not sure entirely, but we'll see.
I mean, I'm open-minded. I think, like I said, I think a lot of different systems could work. So I'm not like one of these people who's just completely set on one specific thing. The one specific thing that I think is important and that is completely congruent between politics and spirituality is free will of the individual, of the human being. And so if we come back to every question with basically that in mind, then I think it's pretty intuitive, and I think it's also pretty self-evident.
But what is free will?
Well, what is free will? It's the ability for you to choose and not be forced to choose or coerced or tricked into choosing something that you wouldn't otherwise, right? It's the ability to not be stolen from.
What about when people are tricked into choosing their own servitude?
Yeah. Well, The Road to Serfdom is a great book by F.A. Hayek. That's an excellent.
Oh yeah, I've read that too.
That one. But yeah, I mean, it's basically how, I mean, the human species has been here a long time. We don't know how long. And we've definitely been subjugated in many different ways, frankly. So I think it's free will is a cornerstone of existence, right?
So freedom is a core value to you.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think freedom is spirituality expressing itself, because spirituality would not, like true spirituality, I think, would not place limits on someone or guilt or shame or tell them that they can't do this or do that, right? And try to force them or coerce them in any way, right? Like that's free will being tampered with, which is, I feel like the opposite of freedom.
So does that require and there not being a state?
No, I don't think it necessarily requires there not being a state. Again, I think there's a lot of different ways that things can be laid out. I don't think that going into politics is the best move, frankly. I think that the state should be small, like at best. but yeah, I don't think that going into politics is necessarily the answer either. So I think things are pretty wild and kind
I
of.
suppose it depends what we mean by politics, because like there's political parties and all of that.
Mhm.
But as we build the new Earth, I'm wondering if like we need to build parallel systems rather than relying on what's
Well, that's what I'm. That's
falling
exactly
apart.
what I mean. So the idea of pendulums, right, and the idea of this system, is that the idea should be that we completely not fight against it, right? Like, so that's the thing about a pendulum. It doesn't matter. Tension's energy, right? When we get prodded and we get angry and we react, it's getting that energy. So that begins to create the world. And now we've got this momentum going in this particular direction. And so now
It's energetic. So we're seeing a reflection of the energy, right?
Exactly.
So we're missing the point if we're trying to directly physically change it per se.
It's like trying to affect the effect. That's exactly right. We're not at the cause of it at that point, right? So what we need to do is disengage from systems that don't serve us, that aren't helpful to us, and build other ones.
So it's psychological. And I don't like using the word warfare, but what the elites, so to speak, or whatever you call them, one thing I've noticed that they do is they do psychological warfare. They very much, it's almost like a vampiric relationship of taking energy, but they kind of get people to consent to that without realizing it. And I mean consent in a spiritual sense. But the solution is, I guess it's as simple as helping people raise their awareness and stuff, right? I mean, obviously there's more we can do than that, but
I think that's definitely the beginning. It's really about awareness. And what is it that you want to focus on? Because ultimately, like, we're just our power is attention. What we focus on, where attention goes, energy flows. And that's what we really, that's a power that we really have. If we focus our attention on what's wrong and negative, it's like being against something is not a position. It actually reinforces the thing that you're against. That's all it does. And if people could understand that, and we could, take the spiritual principles that we know to be true in the metaphysical world and apply them to the physical world, then things would look a lot different. That's
I've got a question.
The thing to keep in mind is that whatever you fight against, you're actively perpetuating.
Okay, that's true. Fighting definitely won't help. So how do we bridge divides or whatever in the New Age community or spiritual communities? Where, for example, I'll give an example of one divide might be, I suppose feminism might be one, or the issue of race relations.
Sure.
These Trump, for example, okay. Even in the spiritual community, you get some people even go so far as they support, Q, whoever that is, like whatever that is, and then you get people who, they might support identity politics in right. In a sense of, say, radical feminism or something, and everything in between. How do we got to say, oh, you're wrong, and fight them. So how do we come together here? Yeah,
well, I think that if we have to examine our motivations for why we serve the ideas that we serve. So the idea of a pendulum it's based on really ultimately negative energy and gaining more attention and energy, mostly through that. Like the power of bad press, man, it's pretty insane. So I think we really have to actively focus on where our attention's going and ask ourselves those questions. Like, why am I reacting to this? Am I being persuaded or coerced by guilt, duty, or obligation to comply to this? Because if that's the case, then you're certainly not making the decision out of love. And so I would say that free will is the expression of love, in this model that I present. again, yeah, don't believe anything, just have your suspicions, right? So everything's a model, everything's a map, everything's something that we're trying to apply, not necessarily the thing itself. I don't know that we can necessarily ever know the thing itself.
It's all maps of meaning, subjective
maps
meaning.
Of meaning. Exactly. And so it's just a way for us to interpret what we're experiencing, right? Everything sort of being that metaphor. But it really comes down to examining what our motives are for serving the ideas that we serve. If I feel guilt, duty, or obligation to do a certain thing, to comply, to bow my knee, to kiss the ring, then I'm not operating out of love. That's fear, period, every single time. And that's the real power of narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths, to really understand and know how to manipulate people. And so that can happen on a small scale individually, or in a small group, or it can happen on a larger scale. It's the same thing. Anytime that I'm forcing a choice or giving you an ultimatum, I'm forcing you to choose. I think that's a manipulation tactic for sure. And especially if there are incentives to comply that are based on guilt, duty, or obligation, like you're not of this, you don't love me if, that's all conditionality.
Right.
And so that's not based in true spirituality.
And no matter how righteous the cause might seem, if that's being done, then you know what's really going on.
Exactly. It might seem like a, super noble cause, but if they're using those types of methods to recruit people, manipulate people, or force them to comply or be a part of something, then they're off base. You can't force love. It's back to the free will.
Right.
I can't make you love someone. That's what we see that a lot in political movements and protesting, etc.
Though we do get distortions of love. I mean, the law of one is that everything's one, and that oneness is love, and everything else is a distortion of it. Mm-hmm. Like, people might seek love by trying to, in hookup culture.
Sure.
And their sort of twisted idea of love,
right,
or the love that they didn't get, and from their sense of incompleteness as well. I mean,
right. Well, that's their definition, their subjective, perception of love as they define it, which is real. But when I say love, I guess in that sense, I just mean from the unconditional sense, right? So most of us have conditional senses of love. You know what I mean? Like, we don't just love anybody for no reason at all. But, ultimately, like, the creator or the source, or whatever we want to call it, infinity, is operating from that place of unconditionality. So I don't think that there's any, comparison. And that's the big thing, right? When they say don't judge, that's how you can tell too. Like if I extend you an offer and there's like there's a subtle, thing that I'm asking in return, then it's conditional, right? And so conditional is judging. It's like, you can say, this is not, this person does, you could call a spade, as long as you don't put yourself in a position of being above or below them. Like, right. Like, when I first started learning about this stuff, I was like, oh, I'm better than people because I know stuff. Well, I don't think.
So we've got all this ego, and we don't necessarily off the bat have an open heart and unconditional love just because we've discovered those principles. So how do we get from learning about it to actually having an open heart?
Yeah, to just applying it and living that way. I think it comes down to attention and gratitude, ultimately, like especially in the morning. But I'm also trying to add an evening routine to that. But really just understanding and coming from a place of love and living from the inside out. I think when we get things flipped around, this thing's happening over here, this is oh my God, we're running around, we're emotionally affected by it. We're not at the cause, we're at the effect of everything, right? And so we're basically just being, puppeteered by circumstance. And so that's not very much of a position of power for us, or a healthy mental state either to run.
Right, but suppose there's some degree of chaos in your life, right? And you know that it's there, you're seeing like a messy situation. I know there's judgment, but and you're like, okay, I know
No,
this is a reflection of me,
yeah.
but what fucked up shit is going on me for this? And you're like, how do I figure this out? And you be like, okay, I'll do some healing then. And it's like, well, okay, but it's weird, you know, it's still a mess. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, messes are going to happen. That is, again, friction. That is the friction of reality. How are you going to respond? You know, like no matter what happens, you ultimately have the choice of what your thoughts are, how you feel in your body. You know, that is yours. That's sovereign. And that's really about that free will. So no matter what happens on the external, we still do have that choice. That's what Viktor Frankl talks a lot about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, you know? And so he talks a lot, he says the reason why we know we have free will is because no matter what you do to me, I still choose how I respond to it. So that's his sort of case in point. And I would say, again, you know, back to the free will thing, ultimately, like we were talking about earlier, all things are dual. So it's true and not true. It's like, I don't have free will over everything. I just have free will over, you know, the choices that I make, the thoughts that I think, etc.
Right. Well, someone might say, okay, you make it sound like it's easy. You know, they might say, oh, I've had all this trauma. I've had like every day I get all this stress. All these things are going wrong. And you're just saying, oh, just be grateful and everything will work out, sort of thing.
Well, I didn't say that.
Well, there you go. I'm misrepresenting you, aren't I?
I mean, that's definitely the first thing I would say. I mean, you can't. So they talk a lot about jumping timelines, for instance, right? You got to jump timelines. And I think people have this perception of that if you jump from a timeline to another timeline, then like the circumstances are different. It's really that you're moving within reality, you know, this objective world, you're moving subjectively within that objective world, right? That would be jumping timelines. It's not a very accurate way to think,
you know,
about
I guess it's like people think of it like in comics where there's this timeline and there's that timeline and they're completely separate worlds. But like there's loads of tiny little strands and everything is all that. And so like moving to a different timeline, it's like every millisecond anyway. Right?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And it's subtle as well. Super duper subtle, right? So really the only way to really go up is through getting access to higher emotions like gratitude. And so like, yeah, it's real easy for me to sit here and say, all you got to do is have gratitude and just feel good in your body and then life will catch up. No, there's a lot more that you got to do. You got to stay adamant about that. And you also have to take action, you know.
What do you do then?
Well, I wake up in the morning and the first thing that I do is I think about someone that I have an intense amount of appreciation or adoration for. And that creates a feeling of that very thing. Like it's pretty amazing. Whatever we think about, like kind of just like generates in our body as far as an emotion goes. So I start with a gratitude practice in the morning, and that's how I start it. And that changes. You know, sometimes I think about some people who are still with us or no longer. You know, just different figures, people that I'm grateful for.
And how do you feel? And how intense is it when you do this?
Well, I think the more that you focus on it and the longer that you do it, the more intense that it can get.
Have you ever cried in joy just in the morning?
Of course, all the time. It happens to me spontaneously. And the more you build that practice, the more you're going to feel that way.
Man, I'm almost jealous.
I mean, dude, it's your birthright, you know? I think breath work has really helped me a lot too, to access some deeper parts and really feel more. But it really is just as simple as just, you know, feeling an emotion that is, you know, however you can trigger it, and then just focusing on it and basking in it. Like it's really, really, it's simple. It's almost
right.
silly.
We already have it. So dwell in, bathe in the light that is you. And so if you've got the gratitude, if you've got the love, if you've got the compassion, why not treat yourself with it in the morning? Or you can flagellate yourself in the morning over that time where there's a stupid thing you said and it was so embarrassing.
Yeah, or get on Twitter and start watching people get, stabbed on the internet. And I've done all of the above, right? And so what I've found is that when we put ourselves at the cause and we're maybe, this is secondary. This physical world is secondary. It's so easy to forget that and get swept up in this exterior world. Like I said, they're both real. The dream world's real and this physical world is real, and they're real in different ways. But this is at the effect, this is the shadows on the wall, right? Like this is what has been created or made manifest by whatever is in the mind, which is truly, truly infinite. And so, like, I can't tell you how much hope there is just in the idea of infinity. But putting ourselves at the cause of our day at the beginning of the day, it can really help. And then I spoke to Daniel James this past week, and he was very emphatic about also doing it at the end of the day. And I think that's a great thing to also to think about and point out, because that way it can carry over into your dreams as well, into the night, but also potentially into the morning. So you're continuing that sort of momentum of attention and love and self-love and focusing on yourself. However you can derive it, think about a puppy or whatever makes you feel the warm and fuzzies. And then attention is just an amplifier. So focusing on that feeling itself will just continue to make it happen,
What about shadow work? Because
I still have more difficult days. Some are, better or worse, but ultimately, right, like you inch up get to that next little inch up the timeline. That's the only way.
Okay. Something I've experienced is releasing pent-up negativity that's been repressed and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of stuff we don't even know is there until we do. And like, mm-hmm. I'm sure you're not suggesting spiritual bypassing. So how do we do what you're saying while at the same time paying proper respect to the fact that you've got all this pent-up negativity and stuff inside you, potentially?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's real work that needs to be done. And that's what shadow work's all about, and finding someone to potentially help you release trauma. It doesn't mean you can't feel good and still have wounds. We all do. And I'm continuously doing that work and just kind of frees up more space. It's like getting those traumas out just opens up more space for that feeling of love to just like expand even more. So, that's real spiritual work. I'm certainly not, like you said, advocating spiritual bypassing, but working through a program like the Core Method, which Jim Shane teaches, or really there's numerous, there's, tapping techniques and all that. I personally like to work with like a trauma release agent, someone who can kind of guide me through the process of, doing some like Reiki or some sort of healing kind of stuff. A lot of people are called coaches or cosmic healers or whatever, because the techniques that they practice are not, traditional Western scientific psychology, right? Which I think a lot of them are ancient, frankly, but like I think a lot of the Western medicine, and again, I think a lot of it's really helpful, but a lot of people go into therapy and just re-traumatize themselves a bunch, right? They don't necessarily let go of the thing that they went in to fix, right? It's just like it just keeps coming up and keeps coming up. So I think it's necessary to let go of that. It will open space within you.
How do we let go of it? Because that sounds like it's easier said than done.
Well, it is easier said than done, for sure. I mean, it takes focus, and it takes there's a lot of different techniques. This book right here, The Body Keeps the Score, is one of the, I guess, classic books about it. But Jim Shane's book, The Core Method, is really good. I like working with somebody one-on-one, but it's stuff you can
What is the Core Method, put really simply?
So put really simply, it's a way to acknowledge your traumas and just release them, let them go out of your
acceptance is very powerful.
It's mostly acceptance. That's really what it is. And people call it releasing, but I think acceptance is probably more accurate, because it's not that you are forgetting about an experience that you had. In fact, you're probably remembering more. but it's really about redefining your relationship to that particular event. And so we're constantly imprinting, again, back to Robert Anton Wilson talking about the 8 circuit model of consciousness. We've imprinted over the course of our lives many different ideas and beliefs about the world through traumas. Some we don't even remember. So, it's just it's just an interesting part of spirituality and one of the deeper parts. And it's really work that it goes on for a long, long time, but I don't know. That's it's the good stuff too. Like letting that stuff go, it really does open up more space.
Can we, through service and helping others, can we heal that way?
I mean, I think there are many ways to heal. And there are probably many catalysts as well. I think that can be helpful. I think that the one thing to watch out for there, though, is that we are putting ourselves in a position to just serve other people, and we lose our own. Because I mean, if you're doing that because that's what you really feel like you need to be doing, then it's the right move. But just serving other people without it being fulfilling to you, I feel like that's
right.
Often
that can be draining your cup.
Duty or obligation. Again, it comes back to those questions. Am I doing this out of guilt? Am I doing this because I feel bad because of something
right
else?
Yeah.
Or am I giving my gift by doing this?
Right? Are you doing it are you dwelling in your abundance in doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Are you being kind to yourself? Are you loving yourself in doing it? Because if you're not loving yourself, then you're not going to be loving them, really. It's going to be some sort of mental game you're playing with yourself.
Exactly.
And they're going to be just tools for you to feel what? I don't know.
Worth. Have to have any self-worth. It really comes down to self-worth when we're talking about people's motivations, and really that they have value and that they are worthy, and they are. Anybody who's listening to this, I just want to say that you have a reason for being. You're a gift, and that's really what it all comes down to. We've been beat emotionally, psychologically as human beings a lot by circumstances that are the world, and I think it's really easy to forget that. We're like, oh well, I don't do anything. I'm looking at a picture right now myself, like holding up all these receipts from when I was waiting tables. It's like we really just want self-worth. We want to be valued, and it's really easy to forget that you have a value that's completely intrinsic, that is it's incredibly valuable, so worth more than money, the most precious resources at all of that. And people really just want to feel acknowledged for the value that they naturally have.
So the ego is something I from my perspective, the ego is often what's in the way, or at least what we're allowing to be in the way. But it's not a simple matter when it comes to our egos, is it? So
no, because we need our egos, right? Ego's like the bridge. It's like the bridge between the two worlds. Like my buddy wrote a book too. He calls it the bridge, as in the idea of like the bridge on a ship. You know what I mean? Like this ship of self. But which is awesome. That's a great metaphor too. And I think they both work. But the ego is how we interact with this physical world. There's got to be some sort of a contact, some sort of a connection. I don't think the ego is all bad. People want to just like talk shit about the ego, like lose your ego. It's like, no, don't do that. Just be aware, right? The self-concept that ego can create is far more dangerous than the ego itself, right? Like thinking that this identity, this false sense of self, that can become egoic, and then you can get a false perception of who you are and fluff your own mind full of a bunch of importance and think that you're better than other people, right? And that will eventually lead to a fall. So that's dangerous. You don't want to do that. But as far as interfacing with the world and being a real life human person, that's what we came here for.
Authenticity. There's authentic engagement with reality and ourselves, which are the same thing. And alternatively, there's, well, inauthentic or dishonest engagement with it. And the truth always comes back to bite you when you're living a lie.
Yeah, it does.
And that's the issue with ego. And you're right.
Ego's always lying. It's like hiding from something, right? And so I love your point here on authenticity, because it really is about bringing whatever it is that we are to the forefront, because you can't hide it anyway. It's like the more you try to, it's like putting a toupee on, right? Like if I put on a toupee, or, you know, is it going to be, how obvious is it going to be that I'm bald? It's more obvious than if I'm just don't have any hair. You know what I'm saying?
We don't fight our egos. That's not how we deal with it. What we do is we're like, okay, there's this abundance and infinity and love and gratitude and really wholesome things that I am, right? And I choose that because it's way more preferable than misery, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better way to deal with it and focus on what we are rather than try to fight what we're not.
Yeah. I think that's a much better use of attention, because it's almost like your attention's being subverted in the other case. It's like fighting against something. Well, you're never going to win that battle because you're fighting against the thing. You're actually just, perpetuating the very thing that you're fighting against. And so it's like, oh, let's hide from this, or let's go over here. It's like, no, just allow it to be, And I think that's why people aren't recognized for their own unique qualities and their own authenticity. And that's a big reason why we have this concept that we think we need to cover something up. We need to hide something. We need to be something that we're not. And in reality, it's not required. And in fact, it's a much better existence not to hide.
Another idea. How about we love the shit out of our ego? Because, it's not like it does all that it does out of happiness, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like what is a better way, no better way to react than to just treat it, right? But treat it in a healthy way, be acknowledging of it, know what it is, and allow it to be, as opposed to fighting against it or pretending like you don't have one, because that's just a lie.
When it comes to someone like Eckhart Tolle, I don't think they've just got like an inner harmony, right? So what you could call their ego or whatever is just like, is genuine, right? So some people are like, oh, I've got to kill my ego. When people talk always about having ego death experiences, and I guess there's something to that because it's stripping away the bullshit.
It's kind of like being born again, right? Or whatever, right? Like, yeah, it's stripping away the bullshit. It's creating a new paradigm. It's seeing the world in a different way. And so people might quantify that as ego death. And maybe it is for them. I've never been, I did get trapped into the loop of like, even enlightenment itself is a pendulum. Like, oh, you've got to attain enlightenment. It's like, here I am sitting around all fucking day, pardon my French, staring at my navel. And for what, bro? You know what I mean? So what? I can sit here for 15 hours, 20 hours. So what if I levitate? So what? You know what I mean? I don't think it's even, the way David Data talks about it is function, flow, and glow in spirituality. And I think that the enlightenment thing, there's really nothing you can do. Like some people, they snap into it, they pursue it their whole life. Some people just snap right into it, and I don't think that there's anything required as far as works go to get to that point. Some people just, you either attain it or you don't. So I don't think it's a good goal personally, or a very practical one, to try to attain enlightenment in this lifetime. I think it's kind of a waste of time. I don't know. I don't want to discourage somebody if that's their goal, do it. But I say to the regular human being, I don't think that I don't think that's necessarily going to be the thing that's going to.
But there is an ascension right now, isn't there?
I mean, I think the ascension is within. It's like a different way to.
Right, but that's what I mean. But like, I mean, like everyone. I honestly think with the, I don't know. I wonder if like within 50 years, everyone on Earth will have internally ascended, which basically means opened their heart chakras.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what's going on. I really do. I think that's kind of what's going on, and based on the law of one, as well as within the individual, is we're really being challenged to live from a place of just heart right now, right? Going to that next level as human beings. And I think that that's what is going on a meta level as well. It's all reflected. So I don't know what is going to happen in the future, but it's interesting.
It's not like being Goku, right? And just sort of getting a whole bunch of power, and like people focus on the idea of ascension. Like, I don't know, like what you get out of it.
I think there's a lot of spiritual bypassing in that too, like ascension, right?
Yeah.
And like it's like the rapture in Christianity, and I think that's kind of a dangerous.
It's kind of like you're just coming back to yourself. I mean, I suppose it is kind of. I do see it. Like sometimes even I see it. Well, even I. But that sounds like ego, doesn't it? Like I am. Even I, as enlightened as I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the one way that I really like the description of enlightenment, and again, I'm not here to discourage anybody. Pursue whatever it is that you feel you need to pursue, right? Like I'm not here to tell. I'm just saying, like I feel like it's an easy thing to get caught up in and chase, and you're just going to chase. So just be warned there. But like a drop that is suspended in the air from the ocean and the ocean itself. The drop is suspended in the air. It's separate from the ocean, but it is the ocean. So I think the best analogy for it is just understanding that while you're suspended in air, while we're here as this piece, whatever, that we are still a part of that ocean. And so what enlightenment is to embody that and know that you are the entire ocean in that drop, right? Like Rumi says, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. And so if we can extrapolate that and understand that, like, while we're here, we're like suspended in air, we're like, I'm separate from everything. And then eventually we're just going to go right back into the drink, and then just be once again part of that. So
it's true that we're all one, but at the same time, we've got a fractal reality. And David Wilcock's book, Synchronicity Key, it talked about the actual memories when people were in trance, that people recounted memories of being in the spirit world, like they were discrete souls interacting with other souls in their soul group. So like, yeah, we're all one, but like, how does that match up with the fractal nature of reality and souls from through multiple lifetimes?
Yeah, I don't know how long we get to keep this awareness or this separation that we experience. Based on the law of one, it's temporary. It's all part of God resolving, basically.
Well, it's not like we can. I guess we're just gonna we don't know, and that's okay.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I have a hard time with that one too, my friend. I don't like not knowing stuff, but I mean, there's so much that I don't know or even have any clue about, So
but keep in mind, if you don't have an answer, it's okay to just have ideas.
Yeah.
So I'm asking for your ideas. I'm not asking you to give me the truth now.
I hear you. Yeah. I mean, it's all a model anyway. So, I mean, I couldn't, even if no one could. No one can even tell you what reality is, right?
What isn't reality?
What isn't? I don't think there is anything that's not.
What isn't? There's nothing that isn't reality, but reality is infinite nothingness.
It could be, I guess. I guess it could be infinite nothings.
But that would be everything.
ultimately. Yeah. It's a box inside of a box, bro. I don't know what to say.
So there's Schrodinger's cat, but there's a box. That's just one of the boxes. It's infinite boxes.
It's boxes all the way. Yep. Turtles all the way.
Or cats, because they love boxes.
Or cats, yeah. Cats. Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting stuff to think about, but I love it. Like it consumes me, frankly. Like I've been obsessed for a long, long time. But I mean, I've finally gotten to the point where I think that there are answers to these questions, at least subjectively, like what is the meaning of life? What am I here for? You know, those types of things. And I think that we each have a very specific and unique gift to give the world. And we're here for such a time as this. And this is part of the whole thing. And this may be where free will, you know, edges into, this kind of like deterministic sort of view, even where you're just this expression of God or whatever, where you're doing its will, not your own. I mean, and so how, you know, but I think
that's something we can talk about, because there's this diagram with these 4 boxes, right? And one of them is, and it's free will and determinism and 4 positions on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think be free will and it's not deterministic is libertarianism, or something, not to be confused with the other libertarianism. But yeah, then there's like, what is it? Hard determinism is the opposite. No free will, all deterministic. Compatibilism is determinism and deterministic. Then there's this other thing as well. But if everything's non-dualistic, is it really one of those boxes?
It's a good question.
Because if it's all polarity, right, it's more like, I don't know, is it deterministic? Is it not deterministic? Why do we have to choose?
Because we can. I don't know. I mean, we don't have to choose. You know, a lot of people would argue that even the choice that we made was thought about prior, right? And so we're just following a script at that point.
Right, but the choice is beyond the thought, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, is it? I mean, a lot of what we do is completely subconscious and it's just embedded in our body habits.
Right. But then there's the superconscious, isn't there?
Right.
Maybe.
I think so. And I think that's what really feels good, right? To abide in that, which might even be going beyond like free will in a sense, right? Like, and so we've entered another box of duality,
yeah.
I think at that point. And so ultimately it must split again as the law of one, as it continues self, other, right? Like having this realization that we're apart and having this realization that we're together, apart together. Ultimately, I think it's turtles all the way, right? Like it's the same sort of paradox over and over and over again, right, as we continue to explore.
It happens with like densities, right? We've got like animals are one with nature, right? Above that, we're separate third density beings, or we dwell in that separateness, then we're one again, but in a new conscious way. But then maybe below animals, when you get to one density, it's like separate objects. Maybe not. I don't know. But
well, I think that we have to, well, yeah, I think that like in that model of the law of one, like it's really, this density is about self-awareness. So that self-awareness must be tested, which is why we continue to come to the paradox, you know, ultimately until it resolves into another one, which will have.
But does it go up as like, does it go up in this like split together, but in new ways? I don't know.
I think it probably does. I think it probably does in new ways. You know, there's going to be new things to experience.
And it turns out this sort of thing is like DNA or something. I don't know, like, or spiral. And this is sort of shit I don't want on a podcast, like everything being just the integration of opposites and then dividing into two new opposites, and that integrates, and it's just like
a swirl. Yeah. I mean, that sounds pretty. Have you ever done DMT?
I've taken it once. and I didn't break through.
Okay.
But I saw the tunnel, and that was pretty, well, it was trippy. Yeah. What's most distinctive about it to me is you choose your experience. If you let go, it's all a smooth ride. But if you don't, it can be hell. And that is just as true for life in general, but it's especially true when you're on DMT, because it's like temporarily the delay effect is gone. The veil of ignorance or whatever, there's this delay time. It's this time effect when we're here, right? So we can learn. And we've just got to immediately grapple with instant effect from our mind in our experience. Did you experience something like that yourself?
Yeah. I felt completely cradled, by the universe and very, very complete. And I felt like the message that I got was to stop trying to control, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hold on loosely, but don't let go.
Yeah, it's like that. When you let go, you're cradled. But the way I saw it, I actually looked up a whole bunch of stuff about it, like online. And it's like, I can't remember. There's this YouTuber who talks about, he takes a lot of hallucinogenic drugs, right? He takes loads of it, of these different things. And one of them is like described like it's almost like you're being penetrated by the universe and making love with the universe, right? But if you're resisting, you're making it non-consensual, but it's still happening. So you're creating your own rape.
I've never in a million years thought we would have come to this metaphor today.
Yeah, but if you think about it,
right.
Not going with the flow in life is kind of like, okay, a rough time in life. Let's put it that way. I just realized I'm putting this on YouTube, so I should have avoided that word, but oh dear, right. Oh well. I could just, if it gets taken down, I'll just click that bit out. It's fine.
No, yeah. I see your point. And yeah, it's like the more you resist, right? That's the Eastern thing. It's that what you resist persists. And the more you resist it, like you have to let go of what you can't control in order to find a place in the flow. And I think within that you can move, right? But you can't be resistant to everything and expect to get your way. You're only
and people are like, what happens if I let go? What might happen? What might happen is you might have fun.
Right. You might find a new way, a new way that you couldn't have conceived of before, right? And things might begin to unfold for you in a way where kind of going back to the beginning of this, I feel like there are signs, there are things that we can cue off of in the universe for ourselves. And I don't know, I think that's kind of different for everyone, the kind of experience that they're having, but that the universe is providing certain possibilities at different times. And that's when we kind of shoot our shot, right? And then so here we are, we do that thing, take that opportunity when we get it. And it's again very Tao, right? Where you've got the yin, which is kind of like the deterministic aspect, right? Like the things that are happening and the nature around us and all of these types of things. And then the yang or the masculine action, to shoot through the door at the moment when it opens, right? And so the yin might take a while, but it might open that door eventually. And then you take action, conscious mind comes in, masculine. And
right. I've done some readings on it on my podcast, but I was about to ask like, what's your interpretation of it? And then I just realized that's what you're doing and I interrupted you.
No. It's I feel like the heart should lead, right? That feminine intuition that's connected to infinity. And then the mind is really here to kind of not to strategize. And it's an amazing tool. I think we can do a lot with the mind, but I think where we go wrong often is we put the mind first, and we create this idea in our mind, and it seems perfect, and it's going to go exactly like this. And then ultimately there's resistance, interference, and something happens, and then we lose complete faith in what we were doing because it didn't go the way we thought it would, and then we give up.
Yeah.
Whereas if we went with the heart first, it'd be like, all right, cool. So here's what I want to do. I'm not real sure how I want to do it, but here's what I know I can do. I know I can do this one thing. And so the mind, like, we can even make a bomb-proof strategy. I'm not saying don't do that. Do that. Make the best strategy you can. But within that, you've got to be flexible and allow for pliability in circumstances and events, because things aren't just going to go the way you think they're going to go. And any goal that you've ever accomplished in your past, I can guarantee you that it wasn't in the exact manner of steps that you probably would have conceived. So, letting go of the how and just focusing on the why and taking action, and whatever.
Being in the action.
Yeah.
Process. So that's the danger, isn't it? Like, on one hand, you don't want to be trying to control the outcome too much and your action to be basically too controlling to yourself or to others. On the other hand, you don't want to be sitting there inactive, right, while the way is like it's flowing away from you because you're just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
So act, keep moving with the flow, because it always flows. It's in flux. It's in the symbol itself. You see a wave, between yin and yang. I mean, yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
And it takes practice. You can't just intellectually like, okay, this is what it is. All right, I get Taoism, let's do that. No, you've got to practice it.
Yeah.
And
it's a practice, yeah.
But then
you start to see how it works, and it's fucking awesome, dude. Because
it's like sport or anything. Like
any skill,
you practice it. You don't just be like, I know it, and then you do it. So what you're saying?
I am definitely saying that. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
It's more and more fun because, again, it's not about faith or belief. It's about knowing. And when you can thrust yourself out into the universe and know that these principles will guide you, that natural law does not waver.
So what is this knowing without knowing?
Right. Well, I mean, it's just experience. What is an expert but someone who's experienced something a bunch of times?
You're kind of intuitively feeling it out. And
exactly.
You know that it's going to work out. And even if it doesn't, it not working out will work out.
Yep.
And you're just in the now. And really, as much as you can be, which whatever that really means is you take away the resistance to action, because obviously you don't want to be sitting anywhere else. And there's resistance, which is why you're sitting down, because you're resisting doing it. But then there's resistance to, if you're forcing it, that's resistance too, that you're basically.
And then there's the whole different type of resistance that's kind of like your fear of getting out of your comfort zone, right? And so that's a different type of resistance than the other resistance, I would say. But like, you want to go toward that, you know what I mean? Do the thing that you're kind of scared of and continue to grow your comfort zone as much as you possibly can, right?
Yeah, I mean, to my listener, I mean, like, or my viewer, a very good example of that is literally yesterday. I was doing video editing, and I was really trying to get like video clips in it and everything. And I was afraid to do that for a while. I was like, I just want a podcast. I know, and then I can upload it with minimal editing, right? That was my comfort zone, my new comfort zone, but it was a comfort zone. But the question is, like, to what extent was I forcing myself to get it done? And to what extent was I allowing myself to do it? I don't know. But it was my first try, and I'm gonna gain experience as I go and learn. I mean, everything's like that, and any new skills like that.
Everything's like that. Literally everything. And getting it done is better than getting it perfect. So that's how you learn, and there's no other way to get better than, there's no substitute for experience. And that's what makes people an expert, is experience. So it's really a practicing. And spirituality is a practice, and really learning to continuously, choose advantage and to trust the universe with what it's going to hand you. I mean, it's a super fun game. But once you, and it never ends either. Like once you attain a certain level of whatever mastery or knowledge or ability, then, you're not done yet. You still got to keep stepping up, and so beginning with that small grain of light and that gratitude that you can have for whatever that is, and building that up and 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 up to another, ultimately, timeline for you, another paradigm, another experience subjectively of reality. Is objective reality all that different? Probably not. It's some different because of the way that you're experiencing your reality. And again, reality itself objectively is nature, and it's constantly moving. So I think we do influence, ultimately, objective reality. But I mean, it's still going to basically be the same, right? Like it's still objective. It's sort of separate in a sense from us. But yeah, ultimately stepping our way up within that framework through gratitude. There's no other way. It just is what it is. If you talk to somebody who's really, really having a hard time, you'll notice some very common patterns with the way that they speak, for instance, right? Like, this happened to me, I was victimized, right? And that's the sort of mentality that will make you go down in lifelines. I mean, it just is that way. It doesn't mean that those people can't be helped. It doesn't mean that they don't need, resources or any of that, but it's just a common pattern. It's just a very common thing that you can.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go down before you go up. That's what you said. You went through.
The Kabbalion says that as far as you go down, and you will go down first, is as far as you can go up. So that's a good thing. I think it's positive, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm really curious. What's that painting in the background?
This is my friend Nicholas Flame Art on Instagram. Made that, and it was funny because he actually was showing some off on Instagram. He was like, "Hey man, I'm having or I saw it was like a raffle," and I was like, "Shit, I'll put my name in the hat." I felt like I was gonna win, and then that's the one I picked. I really like that piece. It's awesome.
It's like one of them is a being of light, but they've got a black head or something, and I don't know what it is. The other one is.
The other is the Grim Reaper. Star Trek edition. No,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, he does spray paint and flame art, and but yeah, it's Nicholas Nikolas Flame Art on Instagram. He's a great guy. Big fan of his work.
Well, we've talked about all sorts of things, haven't we?
Well, I guess we have, yeah. And I appreciate the sort of variance and the openness that you have about talking about this cool kind of stuff. It's cool.
Thanks. So I kind of feel like it's about time to wrap up. So do you want to summarize what you're about or anything?
Sure. Yeah, I am here, part of the Apocalypse Staffing Agency. I'm here to help people realize their potential, right? And I want to help them recognize their self-worth and what their purpose is in the world. If you want to work with me, or I have some free resources as well, you can go to bootsygreenwood.com, and basically everything is there. I have a Facebook group, I have a YouTube channel, I have a podcast, a lot of different things going on, Facebook profile, Instagram, all that stuff. I'm Bootsy Greenwood everywhere. So if you want to find me, whatever your method of choice is, I try to make myself known on all the platforms through that particular username. And yeah, I'd love to work with you if it's something that you're interested in. There's a link on my scheduling, or on my website that's linked to my scheduling page. I'm happy to talk to anybody who'd be interested in potentially uncovering that. I have a kind of a course that's called well, it's Get Coached overall, but the program that's online is called Beyond Reality. And then I also have another one that I'm getting ready to release, which is Path to Purpose, which is really focused on just getting in 7 days, like from point A to point B. Here are some tools to get you on the fast track, figure out what you're here for, who you are, give you some momentum and some skills, talk a lot about pendulums, as well as purpose, balance, strategy, etc. For things, and try to just get people on a good path from there. So I have a lot of resources and tools that I've been working on. It's been a joy really to work with people and put this stuff together. So yeah, find me at bootsygreenwood.com or anywhere else with that name, Bootsy Greenwood, which is my stripper name. My cat was Bootsy, grew up on Greenwood. Court, was it Greenwood Court? I can't remember. It's terrible, but yep, that's it. Thank you, Nick.
Well then, that was a pretty good spiel, even if it was spiel. No, it was good. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that you had a good time, but I hope you did. Yeah, well, I'm talking to the audience, but well, all the audience really.
I can't say anything on their behalf, but
well, yeah. So yeah, if you enjoyed, tune in again, and or don't, and feel free to have a great day if you want. And bye for now.